Just imagine, a criminal is sought for over 30 years and then finally found. In most cases, such files are probably just closed or left on a police's conscience. But this is a completely different case. For nearly 3 decades, no one was charged with the murder of Morgan Jade Violi, a 7-year-old girl who was abducted from Bowling Green and whose remains were found several months later. Everything changed just recently. On February 27, 2026, authorities announced that they had charged Robert Scott Froberg with kidnapping resulting in death in the Western District of Kentucky. The thing is, the crime happened way back in 1996, and the investigation has been ongoing ever since. But you know what the most interesting part is? This criminal was already serving time when the new charges were brought against him. Robert Froberg is a hardened criminal, and prison could be called his second home. But now, I'll tell you exactly how this crime happened, and exactly how he was caught. At a press conference in Bowling Green, Kyle Bamranger, the U.S. attorney for that federal district, stated that during questioning by authorities, Froberg confessed to kidnapping and killing Morgan. Froberg, who is now just over 60, has been in prison in Alabama since 1996, serving time for robbery and escaping from prison. 7-year-old Morgan Jade Violi was abducted from an apartment complex in Bowling Green, Kentucky in July 1996. Her skeletal remains were found 3 months later in Robertson County, Tennessee. Bowling Green is a city located about 65 miles from Nashville, Tennessee, with a population of around 40,000 people at the time of the 1990 census and about 80,000 people today. For many years, the community feared that Morgan's abductor was quietly living among us. "We were afraid that one of our children could be the next victim," said Baumgartner, who is originally from Bowling Green. "I hope that today's announcement will bring some comfort to this community, my hometown." And it really was a relief, because Bowling Green is a pretty small town, and I think every resident truly lived in fear until the moment Froberg was caught. After all, at any moment, any of the children could have been in danger, but imagine the local surprise when they learned the criminal was already serving time, albeit for a different crime. Morgan was abducted from the parking lot of her apartment complex in Bowling Green at around 12:30 p.m. on July 24, 1996. Witnesses told investigators that Morgan was playing with another girl when a white man first tried to grab her friend. When that didn't work, he grabbed Morgan, threw her into the passenger seat of an old maroon Chevrolet van, and drove off. 2 days later, authorities found the 1978 Chevrolet van, which had been stolen in Dayton, Ohio, abandoned at a truck stop in Franklin, Tennessee. In October of that same year, a woman walking near her home in White House, Tennessee, discovered Morgan's remains in a ravine. The FBI released this composite sketch of the suspect who abducted Morgan Violi from an apartment complex in Bowling Green. About 50 yards from the ravine stood a shed where, according to witnesses, they saw a white 1978 Ford with a glass-louvered window on the passenger side. Authorities searched for information about a second van, but the leads turned up nothing. A breakthrough in the case came thanks to advances in DNA analysis, according to the complaint against Froberg filed in federal court on February 26th. When authorities found the maroon van, they collected hairs from the front and rear floor areas and preserved the samples on glass slides. It's unclear exactly when, but recently authorities obtained a DNA profile from one of the hairs found in the van. The profile was checked through the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, the national DNA database. And, according to the complaint, the hair matched Froberg's DNA. CODIS is a pretty interesting system, and I want to tell you more about it. You already know it's the U.S. National DNA Database, and it was created by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. But let's take a look at exactly how it works. CODIS consists of 3 levels of information: local DNA index systems, where DNA profiles are created; state DNA index systems, which allow labs within states to share information; and the national DNA index system, which lets states compare DNA information with each other. The CODIS software contains several databases, depending on the type of information being searched. Examples of such databases include missing persons, convicted offenders, and forensic samples collected from crime scenes. Each state and the federal system have different laws regarding the collection, uploading, and analysis of the information contained in their databases. However, for privacy reasons, the CODIS database does not contain any personally identifying information, such as a name associated with a DNA profile. The agency that uploaded the data is notified of any matches to its samples, and is responsible for releasing personal information in accordance with its own laws. The idea of creating a national DNA database in the United States was first mentioned by the Technical Working Group on DNA Analysis Methods in 1989. As of September 2020, the database contained over 14 million offender profiles, more than 4 million arrestee profiles, and over 1 million forensic profiles. The effectiveness of CODIS is measured by the number of investigations conducted using data from the databases. As of September 2020, CODIS had assisted in more than 520,000 investigations and produced over 530,000 results. Each state has its own database, and each state can set its own inclusion standards, which may be less strict than those at the national level. For this reason, several profiles that are present in state-level databases are missing from the national database and are not regularly searched outside their state. This system is actually quite complex to understand, so I've given a brief overview. But if you're very interested, you can do a Google search and read about this system in more detail. The most important thing is that this system helped in this case too, so it was definitely not created in vain. That week, authorities went to Montgomery, Alabama, where they questioned Froberg at the local FBI office. According to the complaint, Froberg was read his Miranda rights, and he agreed to speak with law enforcement. During the interrogation, according to the complaint, Froberg confessed to kidnapping Morgan and admitted that he was the one who put her in the van. He also confessed to killing Morgan by strangulation and dumping her naked body in White House, Tennessee, after exiting Interstate 65. He said he threw away her clothes because he was afraid there might be DNA on them. According to authorities, Froberg was on the run at the time after escaping from a jail in Alabama and from custody in Pennsylvania. The first escape happened on April 3, 1996, when Froberg, who was serving time for armed robberies, escaped from a work detail and stole a 1986 Oldsmobile from an elderly woman. According to the complaint, Froberg then headed to Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania, where he was found by a 7-year-old boy in a treehouse that neighborhood kids often played in. The boy's mother called the police, and Froberg was arrested, but a couple of months later, Froberg made a daring escape from the Northumberland County Jail in Cole Township, Pennsylvania, by climbing up a drain pipe to the roof and descending on a rope. Robert Froberg was charged in connection with the kidnapping and murder of 7-year-old Morgan Violi, who disappeared from Bowling Green, Kentucky in 1996. A week after the escape, according to authorities, Froberg stole a maroon van from behind a house in Dayton, Ohio, about half a mile from the home where his parents lived and where he grew up. Then he headed south, planning to hide out with a now deceased nurse he had befriended while serving time for armed robbery in Alabama. According to the indictment, Froberg got off Interstate 65 to look for marijuana when he met Morgan and her friend. After killing Morgan and getting rid of the maroon van, Froberg told authorities that he stayed with the nurse in Huntsville, Alabama. Then he returned to Pennsylvania, where he was arrested on August 21st, 1996. In his statement, Baumgartner said that Morgan fought back against Froberg the entire time she was in the van. She screamed, she resisted, Baumgartner said. Morgan was a fighter. Morgan's abduction and murder changed her family's life forever. Morgan's family was left with unanswered questions. Who killed? Why? They longed for answers. They longed for closure. I must point out that Robert was a true repeat offender. Thefts, carjackings, illegal substances, and much more. And perhaps the most horrific episode in his life was the crime against Morgan. And the most interesting thing is that he was caught in the same year the crime was committed, which was 1996. But back then, no one remembered the little girl, Morgan. They remembered the thefts and escapes, but not the girl. At the time of her abduction, Morgan was on summer break, having just finished first grade at Warren Elementary School, located on the outskirts of Bowling Green. One of her teachers told the newspaper in 1996 that Morgan was a good student and a sociable girl. She said that Morgan was the only student in her class who took part in the school talent show, where she performed a gymnastics routine. The teacher also described Morgan as talkative, noting that she sometimes got into trouble for talking too much. Morgan, the youngest of three girls, was outgoing and spent a lot of time on her bike, her father Glenn Violi said 2 days after the abduction. "She's very sassy. She's 7 years old, but she thinks she's 15, said Glenn Violi. "She's very, very mature for her age. I hope that helps her get out of this situation." Although the FBI never officially named him as a suspect, federal authorities later admitted that they had investigated him. Glenn Violi told reporters at the time that he had taken 6 polygraph tests and failed at least 5 of them. As the 2-year anniversary of Morgan's abduction approached, Charles Riley, the FBI special agent in charge of Kentucky at the time, told the Courier-Journal that the FBI was no longer investigating Glenn's case. Morgan's abduction and murder shocked Bowling Green, but in some ways, it brought the community closer together. Within 24 hours of the abduction, the community held a prayer vigil, and photos of Morgan were posted on the doors of what seemed like every store and restaurant, as well as on utility poles. When her remains were found, 500 people attended her funeral at Eastwood Baptist Church. Her coffin, a bright purple, her favorite color, was decorated with flowers in shades of purple and pink. After people learned about her favorite color, the yellow ribbons that had originally been tied to poles and car antennas were replaced with purple ones. Morgan's abduction and murder became the subject of countless true crime podcasts and articles, drawing the attention of internet sleuths trying to figure out what investigators might have missed. Just last month, the Bowling Green Police Department reached out to the public for help on its Facebook page. If you have any information, no matter how small, that could help investigators, now is the time to come forward, the post said. What you know could make a huge difference. This case had a strong impact on the public, and over 30 years have passed since the crime. But the issue of children being left unsupervised remains relevant. Of course, a child should be independent, and you should prepare them for adult life. But you must also remember that if you live in a rough neighborhood, for example, or have concerns about your neighbors, leaving a child unattended is dangerous. Marika Brown, a retired major from the Bowling Green Police Department, was a young patrol officer when Morgan was abducted. A mother of 2 children, who were 2 and 4 years old at the time, she was at an aerobics class when the all units call came in. When she got home, she found the all units call on her answering machine. She immediately got ready and went into work early. Brown and the community had no idea how much this case would impact Bowling Green over the next 30 years. Random abductions are rare. This scared people. In the mid-90s, kids often played without adult supervision, especially during summer break. But when Morgan was abducted, everything changed. Churches started filling up with people looking for answers from God and a place where their kids could play safely, Brown said. "This is one of those cases that stays with you forever," she said. "Anyone who has kids or grandchildren knows that this is always every parent's biggest fear. But when you actually see it happen and realize it goes on for so long, that's why it's such a relief, but it also breaks your heart." Froberg is currently being held at Kilby Prison in Alabama. According to prison records, he is eligible for parole in 2028. I hope the consequences of this case affected not only the residents of Bowling Green, but everyone in general, because your child is your responsibility. At least until they reach a certain age. You need to communicate with your child and explain to them that danger could be lurking for them out on the street, and they, in turn, should follow basic safety rules. Don't walk in dark places alone, call your parents if you're running late, and of course, never talk to strangers. Well, that's all I have for today, Frizz. See you soon in my upcoming videos. Bye, everyone.